Aloha, Chair David, members of the committee. I'm Alapaki Nahalea, Senior Director for Kamehameha Schools, here testifying on Reso 412-17. We're asking if the committee to defer the Reso if possible. I've submitted my written testimony, so I won't read that to you. Basically, this action caught us by surprise. We found out about it on Friday by a reporter, so and since it was the weekend, it was kind of hard to get some information about specifically if other parcels were considered, if the whole 42 acres were needed, if other parcels were considered, why was this one a priority? So I think those are the kind of questions we need to be able to answer to make sure we're meeting our fiduciary duty. I really want to thank Director Kacharski for helping this morning to, I think they're going to support deferral just so our teams can get together and figure out how we can be partners on this, because we certainly do value and appreciate the role that they have and we all have in protecting the environment. So we'd like to make sure we're there standing in support. That's it for now. Thank you.
Mahalo nui, Mr. Nahalea.
Resolution 412-17 authorizes the acquisition of private property by eminent domain of tax map key 96002-018 situated at Punalu'u, Pa'au'au, District of Ka'u, County and State of Hawaii for the Pahala Wastewater Treatment Plant. Authorizes the Corporation Council to initiate proceedings to acquire private property containing an area of 42.5 acres more or less to construct a wastewater treatment plant in Pahala in compliance with Environmental Protection Agency regulations requiring the elimination of large capacity gang cesspools. Reference Communication 607, introduced by Ms. David by request.
Thank you. Please, motion to forward Resolution 412 to Council with a positive recommendation.
So move.
It's been moved by Ms. O'Hara, seconded by Ms. Poindexter. And discussion, council members, and please note that we already have some testimony from Mr. Nahalea. So, Ms.
Right.
O'Hara, go ahead.
Yeah, with regard to this, I think we will be moving, I hope we move to defer this because I think that Kamehameha Schools was caught a bit off guard by this. And who is here to speak to this acquisition from the department?
Mr. Kucharski
Mr.
is here.
Kucharski. I'm eminent domain is a pretty serious action, and I'm surprised that the landowner was not informed before, or is that not correct? Or why is this become such a surprise to the landowner?
We have been in discussions with Kamehameha Schools about the property. There was no question but that they were involved in the process. What didn't happen was a communication to them that it was coming up to council today, and that was an error on our part in communication. Kamehameha Schools cannot sell property. They need condemnation. There is no disagreement between Kamehameha Schools and the department on this that I am aware of, but we are in agreement that we will defer this, and we agree with the deferral so that we can have additional discussions so that if there are any things that are not understood, we have the opportunity to get them clarified.
A talk story should occur, and that this was coming forward. And I have to agree with the councilwoman that eminent domain condemnation is a kind of the end of the road as far as the conversation goes. If that's what has to happen, fine. But I think the talk stories first, and especially months in advance. I'm aware that the property was being evaluated back in July, I think it was, or maybe a little bit later. But that doesn't mean something's going to happen. That's just doing homework. And so it bothers me that Kamehameha School found out about this through the newspaper on Friday, rather than being contacted months ago, because I would assume this has been in process for a little bit. So we have a communication problem coming forward. And I think in order to have good working relationships, we talk story first. And I appreciate the fact we need to get something done. I understand that. I'm just bothered by how this is brought forward, and it's a taking rather than a conversation first. So I'd like you to respond to that.
If the communication was not going forward, that's a problem that I need to look into. Conversations were going on with finance and property and going through the process of evaluating this piece of property, and so I will ensure that any kind of miscommunication we've had within the department has been clarified. There was never an intent to go around with Kamehameha Schools. They've been very cooperative. They're great citizens for the state and landowners. And if we've gone into the condemnation route, it was my understanding that that was necessary. If not, that's something that we can get clarified. I can only come in and say that there was never an intent to bypass or to cut corners or to go into or to create any adversarial situation. There was never an intent to do that, and I apologize for the department in getting down this path with a misunderstanding of this type.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Director. We were having the conversations with real property tax, with finance, with everybody except the landowner. And I think that's kind of a key issue there that should have been realized. So with that, I don't want to take a lot of council's time. I'm going to yield, but I'm going to be supporting a deferment to have the talk story, because I think we don't need to start rattling sabers right now. We need to talk story first.
And how much would the wastewater treatment plant cost?
The wastewater treatment plant at Pahala is estimated, as I recall, in the area of about a little over $9 million.
That's not too bad. How large is our Hilo wastewater facility area?
In property size, I'm not sure. It's not, since it's a mechanical system, it's much smaller than we use for our biological systems. So it's maybe 20 acres.
Well, what's the difference between?
Well, in a mechanical system, you have things like biotowers, an aerobic digester. We have mechanical clarifiers. In the kind of systems that we use generally outside of Hilo, because of the conditions, we use natural aerobic ponds where we treat them with minimal of mechanical equipment. So it takes a little bit more space, but you get the same kind of treatment for an R2 treatment, and it's much less operation and maintenance cost on those facilities.
What was the due diligence that went into this particular site as it relates to the large gang cesspools that were trying to close or being mandated to close? And, you know, I do want to state for the record, when this gang cesspool legislation was going through the state, I've submitted testimony to support that, because the environment, and I know every single one of my colleagues completely support the idea of protecting the environment. And I know the landowners to be stewards of protecting the environment too. So if you could just provide some of that backdrop on how this site, why this site.
The process that we went through was to identify, again, where our connections are coming down, looking at property that is available, that is as close as we can get to where our sewering system is to minimize the distance to the treatment facility, and the ability of that property to handle not only the treatment system, but also to do it in such a way that there's minimal upset to the community. And this was a piece of property that was selected. There were 2 or 3. Generally, we go to finance and the land office in there to take a look at various properties. We then take a look at them from the technical side. We go to our design engineers and say, is this suitable for the preliminary design that you have? And from that, then we come in and we start to develop the plans, and then we see if this property is going to be available. And we did those things, and in the communications with Kamehameha Schools and the people on the ground, we've been in discussion with them for many months. And again, this just fits the criteria. We will be doing an environmental assessment prior to any construction. And we will probably also be going in and doing it just to make sure that the use of the property is acceptable under our environmental rules.
This 42 acres currently supports a mac orchard?
Yes, that's correct.
So, and you're leasing to a private party who is doing the macadamia nut. Now, macadamia nut is a nut tree that takes a number of years to be harvestable. So you've got some serious time invested. Is this a very mature orchard, or is this does the orchard cover the entire 42 acres? How is this private party going to be impacted, and how might the landowner deal with that? You mentioned that you're going to be using an environmental type system, which would produce the potential for R1, and you said would be used on the trees within the compound that the county acquires. Would there be any opportunity for that use by the local ag community, because droughts do hit that area, and they've had prolonged droughts before? Is there any potential for that?
We're going to be using this is, I think, currently is planned for R2, but even with R1, I'm not certain that can be used on food crops, and so that is an issue. That's one of the challenges that we face.
I think with orchard-like tree crops, I don't know that that's true. I just would encourage you to double-check that.
We will check. Thank you.
Initially, the other potential was, I think, closer to the town, but that is another that has other issues related to that. It's closer to the subdivision. When I was told that by Mr. Kacharski that the parcel that the MacNut orchard was on, for me, I thought that was a pretty decent place because it's far from the community. It's all downhill, and things flow well downhill. So, and then I just left it up to them. They were going to work diligently with the landowner. And up until this morning, I thought that people were talking stories. The fact that it got put on the agenda made me think that, oh, great, they came to a decision. Kamehameha Schools was not really opposing they were working together with the department and the county for a agreeable sort of eminent domain process. And so until I found out this morning that there was a communication breakdown, and listening to my colleagues here, as far as the place, I think we need to sit back and resume negotiations. I'm not a engineer or anything, but just knowing Pahala and the area, I think that would be a great place. But it still needs to be negotiated to a point where everyone is not probably 100%, but it can be a fair solution, hopefully. And that's what I'm hoping for, because I agree. Eminent domain is sort of like the last resort. And I know that if we put our collective heads together, not only will we meet our requirement to not be dinged further from EPA, but also if we go to eminent domain, the process, that is also a costly process. So I think if everybody agrees, I'm really supportive, and I really thank you, gentlemen, for coming to that conclusion.